Hello and welcome to episode 1 of The Writer's Tea, the podcast where I ramble on all things writing. I am your host, Taylor, and I will be talking today on what to do after you finish draft 1. Our tea of the day is green tea, and tea on the project being I finished draft 1 on February 24th on Monday, 2025. And this marks the first time I have ever fully completed a first draft in a book, which is quite exciting because I've always felt like I can't finish stuff that I start because I get distracted. This green tea is very nice, by the way. I love my light green tea flavor. Like, I don't like the heavy spices, like, if I'm in the mood for it, but I love this. And yes, that is part of the pun in all of this, is that I am a tea connoisseur. Is that how you say that word? I don't know. But I love tea. My name starts with T. I figured there needed to be some kind of pun there. So that's why writer's tea is what it's called. If you're curious. So finishing draft 1 has been incredibly exciting, but now it's the looking forward to, like, what's next, which is why I titled this video, You've finished draft 1, now what? And I did some late research, so to speak, because I wanted to see what a lot of YouTubers were talking about, because people will give their unsolicited advice, and here I am giving mine, even though I've not done it, and it's less of the game plan for you, and it's more of just sharing my observations of how the writing community does things, and how I'm going to implement it in my writing. I have watched 5 different YouTubers, varying amounts of videos related to their editing, and I had plenty more saved to watch later, but then I was like, I could spend literally all day watching these videos, but a lot of the advice mirrors each other. A lot of people have a similar philosophy on how to do things, a similar amount of advice, and we're all just spouting off the same thing. It's the advice like, let your draft sit, or print it off. And whenever you read through that draft, don't make changes to it right away. And edit it plenty before you send it off to an editor, because it makes it more expensive if they have to edit more. And so it's all of these little things that we know as a community that we have been spreading, and so everybody's saying the same thing. And so it was hard to really find really what was different. Was there any advice that I actually needed to learn from these videos, or could I instinctively figure it out on my own and from light watching instead of research, so to speak? The first person I resourced was Abby Emmons, because she was the first big writing channel I found. I was in 7th grade, I believe, middle of COVID, watching Avengers movies, and was obsessed with the Enneagram at the time, and was like, how do I use this to write characters? Because, and I will tell you, Avengers, I'm pretty sure she did an Avengers Enneagram, like, mix, like, she talked about that with writing characters, with breaking down personalities, and used both of those 2 things whenever she'd done a case study, and she'd done a how to write personalities. Anyway, that was how I found her initially. And ever since then, I have continued watching her videos, and so, of course, I'm going to trust whatever philosophy she has on editing. And so she was the first person I resourced. And again, a lot of that general advice that you will get, where people will talk about having a strategy, she talked about having a clear strategy. She talked about how she called the rest time for her story. She called it decompression time, and she said she spent about 3 to 4 months away from the story. I believe the video I watched on this was the how to turn your messy first draft into something actually worth reading believe that's the video. I will have it linked. I'll have the correct one linked if it's not that one. Pretty sure it's that one. So she said to have a plan, and she asks herself some questions before she starts about what she loves about the story and the meaning behind it. She values having a clear purpose to the story or a message, so you need to know what you want to tell others through the story and how you want your characters to change and to identify strong and weak points. And all that to be done to continue to have motivation through the editing process, which there were a few people who touched on the whole idea of it is really demotivating to edit and feel like you don't know what you're doing and it's not worth it and it's bad. And so keeping in mind the reasoning behind it was something that she touched upon. Then I looked at, I believe her name is pronounced Natalia Leah. That is my best attempt. So again, she said, let the story sit for a little bit. And then she talked about printing her story off. Again, common thing. She mentioned using KDP to get a proof copy, which seems like a very creative way to do the printing part, especially for later drafts where you are probably getting into line edits. That could even be better. It's just seeing the printed copy in like a mock-up cover form and getting just to see it all before you. But I would also put as a caveat, because I know formatting books is a whole ballpark in and of itself, I personally wouldn't use it for my first draft just because of all of those formatting things that I would have to look into just to get it formatted properly for a KDP book. I do think printing it would be fun, and it's definitely something I would like to consider for a later draft, but not right now. Not with where I'm at in life, just not ready to try to do that. You also will have to pay for a proof copy, and it won't be super expensive, but point remains, you would have to get all of that stuff set up to get a proof copy, and I'm not really wanting to go through that process just yet. And like many people, she suggested reading through without making changes, and then as you're reading through it, to summarize each and every chapter, so then you could reorganize those summarizations later. So summarizing chapter by chapter on different sticky notes, so then you can put those sticky notes up on a wall or on a table or whatever basic idea, move those little plot points around. But also considering that that is something for whenever you need something for plot heavy. And what I want to get into now is whenever I watched Shaylin's method for editing. She has her own channel and also is on Reedsy, on the Reedsy channel. So I will have both of those linked. I watched many of her videos, multiple. I watched one on zero drafting, on her revision process. She was the person I initially watched to figure out how I want to approach revision. And so I will show my little mock-up of my idea there in a bit. But while I'm talking about it, Shaylin brought up good points in her videos. Because as of now, I've been seeing people who, of course, make known that they are not the right, like, they're not the be-all, end-all. Their advice won't work for everyone. But she made a point that I thought was very important, which was creating tools and processes for your book's needs, which, I don't know, like, I think for me, it's having to take all of this advice I'm getting and figure out what works for me, because it's easy to think that I need to do all of these different steps that other people are advising. And so as I'm moving forward, I'm going to be intentional with that. And I thought that her advice talking about identifying your story's problems and building a plan according to those problems, not trying to fit a revising method and trying to use other tools to show you the problems in your story, but identifying the problems and then the solution. So not going solution problem, going problem solution, basically. She even showed a process as she was building a revision map, which looked very helpful. I will also link that video. I recommend just taking a look at it. She used a fun little example of a writing prompt and then mocked up some chapters and then made a revision plan, I should say. She made a revision plan for those chapters that she had mocked up as like a short story. It looked kind of cute, and the method at which she was doing it seemed like that could be a helpful thing to take inspiration from if you're wanting to do something like that. Then I watched Bethany Adazada's method. I know I'm saying her last name wrong. Again, it's going to be linked in the description. So when she was talking about how long she waits on her book, she gives it a month to sit, which was different to some of the things where I've heard 6 months or 3 months or somewhere in between. She doesn't stay away from the book for that long just because of the excitement of working on it, which I think I'm going to fall into, which more on that in a minute. But she talked about having space away from the book and printing it out. She also mentioned mocking up a proof copy like Natalia Leah did. And all of that to say, she talked about doing a fast read through and looking big picture. Most advice that other people were giving, nothing really super novel, but again, like I like to point out, 1 month to let the book sit. And then I watched this one man, and I don't know his name because I'm pretty sure he didn't say in the introduction, but the channel is called The Edge. And he had the whole fast reading method. He said that he likes to read his entire story in a day or two without making any markups, without writing notes down. If he does write notes, it's very minimal. And like I've said, I've heard other people talk about that one. It's just to read it like a normal reader would, just to get it really fast. And then after that, he starts doing his assessments of the characters and their story arcs and the world building and all of that. And I've heard plenty of people talk about how they assess their stories and what questions they ask themselves. And I think it's just all going to depend upon your story. And that's what I'm realizing with mine, is I don't need all those questions that they're asking themselves about the plot and the world building and the characters. Like, I have certain areas that I already know, even before reading the story, that need a lot of help. And then finally he talks about he re-outlines for the second draft, which I am pretty sure I'm going to do because I like that idea and I've already been thinking about that. That said, there's a lot of advice on the internet, and not everything is going to work for everyone because we all write differently. And my method used to be that I wanted to write a ton of outline before I started. I was following I was watching Abby Emmons first. I was following her 3-act story structure template. I was using her scene cards, and those are all helpful, and it jump-started me, and I really do think it helped me think like a writer to boost me in the right direction of understanding how to write good characters, because her method was very character driven, and I realized that I love good, angsty, character arc filled characters. I like each character being well developed, and that's one of my favorite aspects of a story now. And so it changes my approach to even just the initial writing, and so I don't have to plot as much. And I found with this story, because this story has some characters that I already knew a little bit about them. I had done previous versions of the story, but not drafts. They're completely different. Those stories were different before, but I had an idea of some of the conflicts that the characters would face and some of their personality archetypes already. And so going into it, my approach to the outlining process was different. I did start with a 3x story structure, but after drafting it for the first time, I realized I probably needed to be more careful because I had a dual POV, and so trying to do a 3x story structure with multiple POVs is very hard because you almost need to outline it for both characters, which I don't think I did as thoroughly as I could have. So I think if I had on the front end done a bit more outlining, it would have helped, but I also enjoy a bit of discovery writing. I used to be heavy plotter. Now I'm very in the middle. I did a very loose outlining. I actually just had the different beats of the 3x story structure, which mirrors the Save the Cat model pretty closely, if you know about that one. And I had those beats written down, and I was just giving a really light summary, and I would have bullet points and just knew the overarching direction of the story. But I didn't know many details about it. And as I was writing, some scenes showed up and surprised me, and different things happened that may be due to cut out. That all said, the character arcs are a bit lacking. There were some inconsistencies with my characters, especially my main ones, that I realized they changed from the start to the end. And not in a way that a fluid arc would, as in their goals, their desires, their opinions about the world changed a little bit. And not entirely did they change, but enough that I need to really go back and rewrite some of those earliest scenes especially. And I do like how they've turned out, but I need to work on it a little bit more. And so I'm not even rereading the story, and I know what needs to change. So let's now talk about my own revision step-by-step plan. At least my plan for pre-revision, because that's where we're at right now. So if we were to follow the advice, they would say to wait a month or 3 months or more, and I say no. I say firm no. Nada. I want to read my book very soon, because I also don't want to start a completely different story and then get sidetracked, because I know that's how I get. I really need to be laser focused on one project, or else I will just stop. And I finished draft 1, so I don't want to stop this project. So I say no to the whole letting it sit for a long time. I'm going to let it sit for maybe a couple weeks. And here's my thought. I started writing this book like 8 months ago, so those first few chapters I am pretty distanced from. So I'll be able to look at it pretty objectively. Now, if I do a fast read through, the later chapters, completely different story. I'm very close to some of the last few chapters. I have written the last few in the past 2 months, so I'm very close to them. So I may need to wait over 2 weeks, but I'm wanting to just keep it set aside for about 2 weeks. In the meantime, I want to work on my characters. Now, here's the fun part. So I bought a bullet journal, and I love journaling, and I decided I was watching these videos on having an art journal, or what, I can't remember what they call them, studio journal or something like that. And I liked the idea. I thought it was very fun, but I was like, why keep it to only drawing practice? I decided with a journal, for me, I like to just pour out creativity and ideas and just dump out ideas. And so I built my revision plan, and then I have started making character templates. And I'm not going to show you anything about this character, but this is his design. Again, this is my guy. He's actually one that I didn't pay much attention to in the book. He's more of a book 2 character, but I wanted to just mock up his design and had a good old time with it. But I was able to just do a whole dump of thoughts about this character, about his backstory, about who he is. I'm realizing I want to get into the hobbies of my characters, just know a lot about them. And so I've been working on him, and then this is one of the two of my main characters. I have to do another drawing of the main character. Main character. This is the sibling to the main character, who she gets a bit of focus in chapters, but not as much. So I've got to do the other sibling, and I'm gonna make them. They may end up on the same like spread, or they may get their own spread. I don't know how much I have to write about each individual one. But those two characters, I really want to do a rehashing of really who they are and their goals and motivations and arcs, even before I touch the draft. And so I'm wanting to make these little character sheets while I wait on the story to sit for a little bit, just so that I can still stay in the world and be involved with it, but in a different way. And then after that, I want to write some one-shots. My first projects have always been fan fiction. This story was technically my first project that I never completed and did so many versions to that just, it's a completely different story now. So I don't consider this like my first big project because I never really got super far. Like, I got maybe to the second to third act at one point with it, but that story has been completely scrapped plot-wise, just with the same character names and general archetypes, basically. That's the only thing that has stayed true. And so my big projects that I've worked on have been fan fiction. And so for the longest time, I haven't been doing a long project. I've done some long-form fan fictions, but typically I lean towards writing one-shots. I love, like, found family and hurt comfort and all this kind of stuff. And for your amusement, if you really want to read anything that I've written, it'll be linked in the description. But typically I write one-shots, and so it really appeals to me, the idea of writing one-shots. And I was talking with my friend, and she said that she's been writing some, like, little one-offs of her characters, and I was like, that sounds fun. And so now I want to write one-shots with my characters, especially with a group of them. I have two families that are going to play a part in the overarching storyline of this series that I'm writing. And I say series very lightly because there probably won't be that many books, but I have one of the two families that I really suddenly, as I was writing the third act, I was like, I love them, let me write them. And I grew up, my mom would read me books like Anne of Green Gables. There was this series, I don't know if anybody knows of it, but it's called The 5 Little Peppers That Grew, and it's about this family and the things that the children did, and growing up in their home, and just, like, their little arcs. And I don't remember much about the books, but I remember that I absolutely loved them. And I've always loved things like Ramona and Beezus was, like, one of the first book series that I ever read as a kid. And that may label, like, the kind of stuff I was reading. Like, it was definitely not the traditional stuff that most kids were reading. Like, if you were a big reader when you were younger, chances are you read fantasy or something of that nature, because that's readily available in children's fiction. But I loved families. I loved anything that had to do with the real world and concrete of that, but it's just almost a slice of life. And so I absolutely love Anne of Green Gables, and I really want to go back and do a reread of those books, because I read the first book like a year or two ago, and I was like, I love this book so much. Anyway, that's a tangent, but I realized that if I love these stories and I write them for fan fiction, then why can't I write a whole book about this, like, little family that I have off to the side here? And so I may write some one-shots for them and just kind of get to know the characters, because it's a good-sized family, and so I really want to get to know all of the individual characters. So that's a project that I may start in the meantime, and if that happens, I may be slow to start the revision process on this book. I don't know. Anyway, I did build a game plan. I did. I know you can't see anything about this, but I did make a game plan. And so a lot of it is the character sheets, the getting to know my characters, one shot, working through backstories. On the front end, I know the problems, where people are mostly saying, go through and work through these issues after you've done your initial read-through. I don't need to do the read-through. I know what is messy about some of it. I could sense it as I was writing. And I'm going to continue trudging along and finishing draft 1 before giving up and starting over again, because I felt like it wasn't a draft 2 until I completed draft 1. And so I wanted to see it through start to finish, and I'm so happy I did. But now is the time to identify the issues even before I've written it. Because instinctively, I'm the writer, I know what I didn't like. I know what I felt wasn't good about the story. And so that's what I'm going to be doing over this next month, is just really working on setting it up. It may be a whole month before I actually start the rewrite, but later, I'm kind of thinking midway through March, I do want to start assessing the story and figuring out what I want to change. So I'm excited. I'm very, very excited. And I will be taking you along the journey, and not such a podcasty little talky way. I do want to have some like little behind the scenes, like close-up views at what I'm doing. I'm just not sure how much I want people to know about right now, but I am very excited to talk about my characters and all of that. Before I end this off, I want to end with some final thoughts. And so I want to be forthright with you. Everything I talk about, I want it to be done in a way that glorifies God. I have grown up with a Christian background all my life, and so I feel it's very important that everything I do is an act of worship to God. And so in this time of plotting, what is it that, like, how am I submitting it to the Lord? And that's a big thing that I've been working on in this writing process, is realizing that this is not my story, this is for God. And it's really changed my perspective of my writing and why I write, and the fact that I've wanted to write more since I've realized this is the way that I use my gifts. And so, that said, I want to just give a little tidbit, just some little thought about how I will make this process, and I'm trying to get better about just like praying about things, is praying more about the process and just giving it to the Lord on the front end and asking for his guidance and things. And that's going to be a big thing, is whenever I'm plotting a story, is how does my story glorify God? And does the messaging reflect Christian values? And that is something that I want to make sure is part of my story. I'm wanting this plotting time, as I am reevaluating my story, is reevaluating it with a lens of how does this glorify God? How is this a reflection of Christ, of the gospel, of all of those things? How am I being careful to do that in a respectful and God-honoring way? And so I think that this is the perfect time actually to be assessing and asking those questions, and asking, was my story one that actually was worshipful in its messaging? Is it true? Is it lovely? And that is kind of my ramble, my short ramble on that. Anyway, now that I have said that, I have said all the things I feel I need to say towards this topic, and I know it's long. It's impressive that I was actually able to ramble to myself for 40 minutes, but at the same time, it's really not, because I'm really great at talking to myself. There's a reason my tea is cold, though. It's been 40 minutes. I have about 2 sips of this left. Thank you all for watching and listening to my rambling. I will be back, whether with a regular traditional video or with another podcasty talkie video. I'm very excited to do this. Anyway, this has been The Writer's Tea, and I am your host, Taylor, signing off. Goodbye.